Morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We will begin with chapter 9, verse 18. And in these psukim, the Torah talks about how the Jewish people were guided by the cloud, God's cloud of glory in the desert. And the famous phrase, Al pi Hashem yisu b'nei Yisrael, Al pi Hashem yachanu. By the direction of God, the Jewish people traveled, and by the direction of God, they camped. Kol yemei asher yishtone anan al mishkan yachanu. Whenever, all of the time, that the cloud would reside over the camp, over the Mishkan, they would be camped. And now the Torah goes into a number of psukim that presumably is all just telling us what's self-evident. It says in 19, if the cloud would be over the Mishkan many days, so what do you think they did? They listened to what God conveyed to them, and they didn't travel. 20. Sometimes the Mishkan was only the cloud was only a few days over the Mishkan. Well, they did whatever the cloud did. 21. Sometimes it was just an overnight stay. The cloud stayed night, and then in the morning the cloud moved, they went. Or a day and a night, and the cloud would go, and they would go. 22. Yomayim, 2 days. Chodesh, a month. Yamim, more than that. So they would do whatever the cloud did. So theoretically speaking, if we were to have deleted the last 4 psukim, the Torah is so exacting. If we could have deleted the last 4 psukim, I don't think we would have been missing anything, at least not at face value. It's just giving concrete examples to the point that they would follow whatever guidance they got from the Mishkan. So the obvious question is, why does the Torah need to give all these examples? It's a very interesting Ramban over here on Pasuk Yud Tes. V'tam uv'ha'arich ha'anan lomar kim yarich ha'anan al Mishkan yamim rab. This is teaching us that if the cloud spent many days over the Mishkan, v'amakom ahu einenu tov beineim, and that place was not good in the eyes of the people. And they very much wanted to leave there. Even so, they wouldn't violate what God wanted. That's why it says at the end of that first pasuk that the Jewish people would guard the guardianship of God. It's a very dramatic way of saying that they did what God said. It was only their reverence for God and their great desire to do His will that wouldn't make them leave, because the place was a terribly unpleasant place to be, and the cloud was there for so long. Then the next pasuk is, it could be a number of days, like 2 or 3 days. They were wiped out. And the travel had made them so exhausted. And it was only 2 or 3 days. And they want to stay longer. They want to just rest. In that case also, and the other way, if the cloud moved, they'd say, okay, we got to go. Yeah, but we're tired, we're beat. It doesn't matter. The cloud goes, the cloud went, we've got to go. And the pasuk goes on to tell us, sometimes it would just be one night, and then by the next morning they'd be traveling. It was a great disturbance for them to just stay somewhere for a night. I'm not trying to be cute here. They were traveling as families. People ask us all the time when we go on trips, all the driving in one day. If it's ever possible to do all the driving in one day, we do, because we hate staying over somewhere one night and then going, because it's so hard on the kids. If it's hard on the kids, it's hard on the parents. I'm sorry, and there are times, the cloud would stay in a place day and night. They had gone through the whole night. And they got to the new spot in the morning. And the cloud would reside there all day and the night. And then by the second morning, the cloud would move again and they would go. That was a greater trouble than the first time. And he says, so sometimes, it's difficult to be a very short stay, but sometimes if you stayed a whole day and the following night, then you're like, oh, we can unpack. In other words, if it's just the night, you're not even unpacking yet. Then you start to stay the whole day, so you got all unpacked, and then the next morning it's going again. So the point of the Ramban is that each and every one of these examples carried with it a unique challenge to keep on soldiering along. And I think that's a very powerful muscle for life. Obviously, we don't have a cloud guiding us, but we have a sense of right and wrong. We have a Torah which gives us guidance. And many times, by the way, we don't have much of a choice. We're in situations that might be very difficult for one reason or another. And we know what the right thing to do is, but we know it's not the easy thing to do. And there's a lot to learn from in these psukim. And the fact that God, according to Ramban's Pshat, the fact that God conveys this in these psukim is I think it's a tremendous validator for people experiencing great difficulties. That God didn't just say, yeah. These are the words of God. Yeah, they followed the rules. Good for them. Check. God recognizes that each single situation carries with it its own difficulties. And many times people don't recognize it very well, other people, but God recognizes it. So I just think it's interesting to think about. Last point here in Ramban, he does just mention that it's possible that this is not just a range of theoretical examples, that these psukim might cover the range of scenarios that they had in the desert. And that might also be the pshat. But presumably the reason why that would be important is because of what the Ramban's been explaining up until now. But just an interesting thing to think about, is this a theoretical list that's just indicative or the conceptual model of what happened? Or is it actually literally, these were all of the different types of itineraries that they had in the desert? It's an interesting thing to think about. Okay, moving ahead, chapter 10, verse 29. Chapter 10, verse 29. I think this is one of the most confusing passages of Psukim in the Torah. There's not so much said about it, but I just think it's interesting to think about it a little bit. Moshe said to his father-in-law, we know him as Yisro, we're going to the place that God said he would give to us. We're going to the land of Israel. Come with us. We'll treat you well. Because God is going to do good things for the Jewish people. And you know by now that when God says he's going to do good things, he's going to do good things. And he said he's going to do good things. Stay with us. 30. Vayomer elav lo elech. Yisro says, I'm not coming. I'm going back. I'm going back to my land. 31. Vayomer Moshe says, Al not tazov osanu, please don't leave us. You have known our encampments in the desert. Literally translated, you have been for us as eyes. Maybe we'll talk a little bit more about that. 32. Imanu, and it will be when you go with us. Whatever good God does for us, we'll do for you too. So, did Yisro come or did Yisro not come? It's not clear in the pasuk. Of all the conversations in the Torah that are not related, of all the conversations during these times that are not related or are related in little hints, this whole back and forth, why is it so? Why didn't Yisro want to come? Why did Moshe think if he would say something else that would help? Let's look at the Ramban on Pasuk Chavtes. Ramban on Chavtes. Vayomer Moshe lechovav. Kvar pirashti ki chovav shem charash shekaru liyisro kasher shavu Torah Yisrael. This is, by the way, just a very interesting sidebar. The Ramban says the reason he's called Chovav here is that's the name he picked up when he kind of came to be among the Jews. We talk about Yisro as being a convert. So from the time that he converted, he started to be called Chovav. Ki zederach kol hamiskayer, ki lavadav yikra shem acher. This is a normal thing when a person converts. Of course, it's not a halachic obligation. A person who's gone as Bab all these years can continue to go as Bab even after he converts. But the point is, it makes sense that after he converts, he has a new name. V'nei Moshe chila panav l'lechasim lahem. Moshe beseeched Yisro to accompany them. V'yomer lo stam beitavnu lach. Moshe originally says to them, we'll treat you well. V'uchashav sheyitnu lo min hashalo kesef v'zav uvgadim v'tzon uvakar. So what did Moshe mean when he said we'll treat you well? He meant all of the spoils we'll share with you. There'll be silver and gold and garments and livestock. We'll give you some of all that stuff. But you're not going to get a share in the land of Israel. You're not a member of any of the tribes. We'll look out for you. We'll be nice to you, but you're not going to get a share of the land. And therefore, says the Ramban, Yisro wasn't interested. I don't need, no offense, but I don't need to go with you to be a stranger, or not a stranger, but I don't need to go with you to not have my own plot of land. Ramban says, look at what Yisro said back. Ki im el artzi v'el moladati elech. I'll go back to my own land. Ramban says, you know what Yisro's saying? I'll go to a place where I own some property, and you're not giving me any property in Israel. Kisham nachla liyunachasim chavod. I've got all kind of stuff there, including property. Oz Amrlo Moshe. Then Moshe says back to Yisro, Al na tazov osanu. Please don't leave us. Kimidatcha hamidbar tielanu leinayim b'chibush u'haratzos v'soreinu haderech hashena leba. You know the terrain very well here. Vayisalanu leinayim. You can be for us eyes. You can be a good guide for us as to where to go and how to do it. Umikol hatov hahu asher yetiv Hashem lanu netiv lach. All of the good that God gives us will give to you. He's saying more than he said to him originally. Ramaz, Lase Sloach Huzav Eretz Tova. Now he's saying to him, we're going to give you land in Israel. Because you're going to help us conquer the land. And so in exchange for that, we'll give you in the land of Israel. Says the Ramban, and not everyone agrees with what the Ramban's about to say, but this is at least one approach. I think, says the Ramban, Yisro was in. And he did it. And V'kach Amru b'Yushalmi, B'nei Chosein Moshe, Mevi'in v'Korin, Tichsiv l'cha itanu, V'tavnu lach. Ramban brings a great proof to his theory about these psukim, because when a person brings first fruits, there's a formula that's said, and part of it has to do with the land that you gave to us. So it's a whole question. If a person doesn't inherit land in Israel, can they say those psukim? Yerushalmi says descendants of Yisro who lived in Israel are allowed to say the formula. And you know what it quotes? It quotes the pasuk when Moshe says, "Come with us and we'll treat you well." What does that mean? Rabbi says, "I'll tell you what it means. It means that Moshe says to them, "We'll give you land in Israel." So therefore, descendants of Yisro can say that God, you gave us land. So it's just an interesting thing. Not everyone agrees with what Ramban said, but this is at least one interesting shot. So we discussed Ramban regarding the psukim in the Torah about the cloud and the travels of the Jewish people, and we discussed the Ramban regarding the discussion between Moshe and Yisro.